did arc length. Today we'll talk about the equation of the circle. You'll see that a lot on the SAT. And we'll talk about the midpoint formula and how we can use that to get certain things on the circle, which we'll go over. First, I want to go over a vocabulary word. This one you'll see a lot in school, if you haven't already. Subtended, a fancy word. Let's go over that, what that means. So let's say we had an angle here. We'll call it A. We'll have another one here, B. And let's say we have the center of the circle at O. And then we have our degree. We'll just call it X degrees, whatever, right? So when two rays, or in this case the radius, and two radiuses are radii, so when these two radii, when they connect together at this angle, we're saying that the angle, this angle itself, the central angle, is subtended by this arc, AB. It's subtended. In other words, it's where the two angles meet. So this angle is subtended because these two radii, or rays, whatever you want to call them, or lines, they're connecting together at this degree. That's what subtended means. All right, so let's look at a question here. Let's say, and we have another point on the circle. Let's put another point there. We'll call it G, whatever. G for good day, whatever. So we have an arc right here. We have AGB. And let's say we have another point here. Call it H. Right? So now we have another arc here, AHB. Right? So let's say we're trying to find what the arc length is of AHB. Trying to find that arc length. And let's say the arc, and this is how we write the arc. Remember, there's the arc symbol, like a rainbow. Right? And we can say arc AGB. And let's say arc AGB is 5 pi. Right? So we're trying to find what is the arc length of AHB. Trying to find that length. What is it? Well, we need to find, first of all, what is the degree of x? So let's say that the x degree right here, and sometimes they use theta or anything, so x degree, and let's say it's 100 degrees. So just put a line pointing there, and we say 100 degrees. So now we know that this angle here, angle O, which is a reflex angle greater than 180, we know this has to be 260 degrees because a circle is 360. So we have that already, and now all we have to do is make a proportion. So proportions can solve a lot of problems. So we're going to say that the arc length we're looking for, S, because they use that for the arc length a lot. Try not to confuse that with a 5. So that's S. So the ratio of S over 5 pi, because that arc length, S, remember, is AHB. We're trying to find it. We're setting up a proportion. We're going to do it with the degrees, 260 over 100. All right, so let me make a circle there. So again, we're just doing the length and the degree, which we did in previous videos. And we use an S for the arc length that we're trying to find, in this case, AHB. Now, right away, try to simplify this. They both have a 0, right? So just get rid of that 0. Now it's 26 over 10. And 26 over 10 is just 13 over 5. You don't have to simplify it if you don't want to, but try to simplify them. Sometimes it's much easier if you do that. So let's bring this down a little bit. There we go. I have a little coffee stain there, it looks like. Right? All right, so now let's have S over 5 pi. It's going to equal 13 over 5 because we simplified 26 over 10. And you can simply just cross multiply. And remember, that's an S, not a 5. They'll make it 25. So this will be 5S. Right? And then it'll be 13 times 5, which is 75 pi. So that'll be 75 pi. And we just do simple algebra, divide the 5 out on both sides. And S will be 13 pi. That's how we got it, 13 pi. All right, so now let's go onto the equation of a circle. You're going to see that a lot on the SAT. All right, so here's the equation of the circle. And you're going to see maybe 2 or 3 of these problems on the SAT. So the equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So you'll get used to that very quickly. You can see there's an x and there's a y. And one question they'll ask you is a question like this. They're going to say on the xy plane, which is basically the Cartesian grid, or the coordinate plane, but they'll say the xy plane. Let's say they say you have a radius of 2, and the center of the circle is at 5, 7, something like that. So you can just take these numbers and plug them in. So the x number you'll put with where the h is, and the y you'll put where the k is. So I can change this now to be x minus h, which is 5, so it's going to be x minus 5 squared plus y minus 7 squared. And it's going to equal r squared, and r squared is 4. Right, because 2 squared is 4. So there it is. There is the equation. So keep in mind, if this was a negative 5, this would be a plus 5 because it's minus. So a minus and a minus gives you a plus. So here's a simple question you'll see on the SAT. They'll give you this, and they want to know which equation it is. They'll give you multiple choices on it. Always look. Don't be fooled, though. I'll give you one. Let's say, for example, another one over here on the xy plane. Again, you're going to hear xy plane a lot. Keep that in mind, xy plane. Let's say the radius is 3, and the center of the circle, say, is at negative 3, 2. So what do you think the equation would be? So let's write it out, right? Bring this all the way up here. So again, the radius is 3, so we're going to say x, it's negative 3, right? So it's going to be x plus 3 squared. Why again? Because remember the equation, it's minus h. So the h is the x coordinate, right? Minus 3 minus minus 3 is plus. So keep that in mind. So we're going to have a plus 3. And then we said a 2, so it's going to be plus y minus 2 squared. Don't forget the squared part. And it's going to equal 9. Or it could say 3 squared, because 3 squared is 9, so you might see that. Right, so keep that in mind. That's how we get the equation of the circle. Now, if I gave you the equation of the circle already, you can list what the center of the circle is. So let's erase this. Green rag with green marker. Why not? There we go. All right. So let's say I gave you this. We did x minus 5 squared plus y, forget it's x and y, don't make the mistake in putting two x's, x plus 2 squared, and we'll say it equals 16. Why not? So what is the center of the circle? What are the coordinates for the center of the circle, and what is the length of one of the radius? So again, we have a negative 5. So how can we get a negative 5? We need a 5, right? So the coordinates would be 5, because remember with the equation it's minus h. Now to get a plus 2, we need a minus 2, because minus minus gives us a positive. This will be negative 2. So there it is. There's the coordinates. The center of the circle is at 5, negative 2. And the radius, again, would be 4, because 4 squared is 16. That'll be the radius. All right, so that's the equation of the circle type questions. Now let's look at a question with the midpoint, that we can use the midpoint formula. All right, so let's look at a question that we'll see on the SAT. And this is using the midpoint formula. So let's say that dot right there, we'll just call it B. Why not? And that's the center of the circle, let's say. And let's say we have points on the x and y plane. Right there, we have 2 points. And we can say that this point right there, we'll say is 4, 0. That's the coordinate, 4, 0, right there. And let's just say over here we had 20, 0, right? 20, 0. And you know the x comes first and the y on the Cartesian grid, right? Again, that's the y-axis, and here's the x. Now the question for b, let's say that the coordinates for b are h and then k. And one of the questions would be, what's the value of k? So we can do the midpoint formula here. And let's say they gave you the radius. They said the radius was, let's say, 10, right? The radius is 10. What's k? Now we can get h and k with the midpoint formula. So in the midpoint formula, and we're just trying to find what this point would be. That will give us h. What's the halfway point between this point and that point? Now basically all you have to do is just do 20 plus 4 divided by 2. And there gives us our mid-range right there, the midpoint value of 12, right? So we know already that h is 12. Stuff like that. So that's using the midpoint. So now we know that h is 12. So we can say that the b, the center of the circle, we know is going to be 12. And now we just need to find what is the k, what is the y term. One thing to know about circles, and I'm sure you know this already, that any point from the center of the circle, any point from the center of the circle to any point on the circle will be the same length. It's symmetric. So you can make a line anywhere from the center to any point and it'll be the same length. In this case, we know that the radius is 10. So we know that from this point all the way to this point, we know is 10. Or any point. We can have a point here. We know that's 10. Or a point here. We know that's 10. And so forth. All right, so let's bring this down a little bit. Up. There we go. You see it a little better. Now, let's use the equation of the circle, and we'll find out what k is. So we'll write it over here. Remember, the equation of the circle is x minus k squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. Right? And that's h, not k. X minus h. Remember, the h is the x value and the k is the y value. So we have x minus h squared, not k. So we already know what the h value is. So it's going to be x minus 12 squared plus y minus k squared equals, and we know what r is already. R is 10, so 10 squared will give us 100. So we have that so far. Always double check. Okay, now what we do is, since we know from this point to that point is 10, we can plug in the 4 and we can plug in the 12 into these points. So we're going to have here, we already have the 12, so we're going to say 4 minus 12, because that's an x point, squared. And we already have a y. We have a 0. See, we have a 0. 0 minus k squared equals 100. Bring this up. So again, all you're doing is you have the formula. You plug in what you have. We have a 12 for an x. And we also have a 4 for an x. And we have a 0 for a y. The 0 for a y. Now we're trying to find the other y. So 4 minus 12 is negative 8. You don't care if it's negative, because negative 8 squared is going to give you 64. And 0 minus k is going to be negative k. Negative k squared is just k squared equals 100. Then you can just do some algebra. So we'll lift this all the way over here. We're going to minus the 64 on both sides. And we're going to say that k squared is going to equal 36. And the square root of k squared is k, and the square root of 36 is 6. So k is 6. So our answer will be 12, 6. So when we come all the way down here, b is 12, 6. So when you see questions like this, you have an x already, which we plugged in here. We found the other x by doing the midpoint formula. We plugged it in there. We have a y. Now we're trying to find the other y, which is the k. And we say it's 6. So we have 4, 0, 12, 6. Now we'll do more questions like this in the next video. Great job.